Hey everybody, Jay Young here with the Jay Young Show, and I'm pleased to announce my co-host, Jordan. How are you doing today?
Fantastic, fantastic. What's new in the world of Jay?
My goodness, man, we're doing so much in the oil business, and our oil wells are coming in, which is awesome, right? Good to know that we're making oil, making money in the oil field. My book is going through the second edition. We're talking about the second edition with Forbes. I'm really excited about that because we're going to talk about the Jay Young Show a lot in the new book.
I have a question before you go further than that, Jay.
Yeah.
What does it take to be an author? Like what did it take to get that book off the ground?
Yeah, good. That's a good question. Having good connections, I think, but also you got to have a little bit of money. I mean, you got to put some money up there because if you have a good idea, you may think it's a good idea, but if it doesn't sell, then it's like a different, and I donate all the proceeds to charity, so I don't take money that way.
That's amazing. What charity?
Yeah,
Your charity?
absolutely. Well, I spread it around. I've got the people on the Jay Young Show, but it's mostly veterans, right?
Yeah.
I love veterans, and we do Helicopters for Heroes, which is a good one. Matter of fact, he is on the guy that did Helicopters for Heroes is on the back of my book, Robert Brooks.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
CEO there, yeah. And
That's
but
so
it
great.
just takes a good idea, but it also takes, having a message out there and feeling confident that the message is real. And I do love our message that we do in the book. And I want to have it out there again. And I'd like to introduce the Jay Young Show and you and all this stuff. And it's just a really great form of marketing as well.
I was hosting the first Super Doug with Heart Energy as you're talking about veterans, and I was just thinking about this, and I had read a statistic, and this might be outdated now, but it said something like I think 7% of the oil and gas industry is made up of veterans or something like that. Like it was a really high percentage. And I just thought that was so incredible that there are so many veterans that find their way into the oil and gas industry. And then for you to also give back to that through your book is just phenomenal.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, man, there's been so many great things. And obviously we are where we are in this world because of people that went and fought. Like my dad was in the Air Force for a short time, and my father-in-law was.
My dad was in the Air Force as well.
Oh, really? Oh, well.
Yeah.
How neat.
Yeah,
I spent a year in Puerto Rico and a year in Austin. Yeah. But before Austin was weird. No, this probably was weird back then too.
Oh man. All right.
Where did you spend the majority of your time?
We have a pretty awesome podcast that's going on today. Robert Barba, you know him really, really well. There's so many thoughts that are going through my head, but what in your opinion is one of the things that's he is known for blank? What would you say?
Yeah. Refracking. When you drill a well, let's say you drill a well, maybe I should have put this on my board, but if you drill a well vertically, let's say you drill a well vertically 10,000 feet and you go horizontal 5,000 feet, okay, you're completing well and you perforate your pipe and you produce the well. And the big thing there is you're only producing oil around your wellbore, right?
Right.
The exposure to the wellbore. And you're only producing 5, 10, maybe 15% of the oil in place. You're not producing very much oil at all. So what Mr. Barba has done, Bob Barba, he's come in and said, hey, we need to refrac your wells. And he's really done a phenomenal job about studying the Eagle Ford or some of these shale formations, shale, studying some of the shale formations to go back in and refrac and get more oil. I mean, it's really terrible. You're spending millions, tens of millions of dollars to drill wells, and you only get 10, 15% of the oil.
Right.
Man.
Well, yeah, the more that you can get out, the better. And he, like you said, is just a guru when it comes to that. So get ready, buckle up, because if you want to make more money, especially through refracs, Bob is the guy to talk to. So definitely take a listen to this.
Absolutely. welcome to the Jay Young Show. Here we go today, and we're excited about this. We're at Super Doug. I know Jordan keeps telling me Super Doug.
It's super.
It is Super Doug 2024, and it's in Fort Worth, Texas. And this is mostly Permian Basin type of companies that have come together and just talking about different ways on how to treat wells, frack wells, drill wells, and of course my co-host Jordan Soto. So
Hello.
We're very excited to have her.
Yes.
And today I met Bob a long time ago, and kind of shows our age. I met a long time ago. No, just kidding. But it was on a lot of panels. You've done a lot of talking around the world, talking about refracts, and I'm like, wow, because I know when you drill a well, I'm gonna kind of dumb this down for some of our people that don't know about the oil and gas business, just if you don't mind, because we don't want to go into it at the beginning and talk way over their heads, which is really easy to do for me. But I want to. So when you drill a well in the coal bed methane, or if it's in the Wolf Camp, what you do is you drill a well. Let's say you spend $10 million and you get 500,000 barrels of oil out of the ground. You're probably looking at 5 million barrels of oil in place. So you're getting 10% of that oil. So it's like there's 90% of the oil still left in the ground, and you're like, why can't I get it out?
Right.
What can I do to go back in and get it? And you have the answer for that. Mr. Bob, thank you very much for coming along. And your deal is your refracking wells. So kind of tell us something about yourself. Just keep it simple in the very beginning, especially so people can kind of, I know I think some of the times we talk, we know the oil and gas business so well, we know what's going on, but they don't. And so I don't want them to listen for 15, 20 minutes going, what are they talking about? Where are they coming from? So kind of.
Hey, Jay, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and refracts are kind of, in fact, I just had an article in this month's Journal of Petroleum Technology and SPE, which kind of explains a lot of this, if you want more background information. But refracts are really a bad word in the industry because historically what people have done with refracts, they've gone in to existing perforations and tried to re-stimulate existing stimulation jobs. The results are spotty. Basically, they call them pump and praise to start with.
Pump and pray.
Or Clint Eastwood fracks. Do you feel lucky today? You know what I mean?
Well, you have the pipe that's so old. So you've already drilled these wells out horizontally. You've already perforated. You already fracked it. You already produced it. Right. And then you're going back in and just kind of trying to do the same thing over again.
Right. That's exactly.
The pipe has to be a certain. And it's hard to do that. So what are the biggest complications?
Sure, mechanically it's not that big a deal, Jay, but the big problem is that, in the past when people did refracts, they did not mechanically isolate. They would just drop little particles and polylactic acid and ball sealers and little cat toy looking rope toys, that sit down there to plug off the purse. And those typically work, you get about a 1% increase in recovery factor. But a lot of your refracts, though, you can get about a 10x increase in recovery factor with a refract. You can get about a 10 or 11% increase sometimes if you mechanically isolate the entire wellbore.
Wow.
So what you go in with either expandable aligners or a cemented casing, and you basically have a brand new wellbore in there, and then basically go in between the old perforations. And the big problem, the reason the opportunity is there is until about 2016, most operators, when they fracked a well, they thought they were launching reserve-seeking missiles downhole. They were going to find the oil and gas no matter what,
Right.
No matter what.
Finally, at some point, the light was off. Conoco did a pilot well in the Eagle Ford where they measured reservoir pressure on an offset about 70 feet away and saw that only 8 feet of rock was being drained on each 50-foot cluster. The rest was all brand new rock.
Wow.
And subsequent to that, people started moving their clusters closer together. They were on 50 to 60 foot cluster spacing back then. So when we do the recompletion now, because recompletions are really what we're doing. We're not doing refracts except maybe in the Barnett Shale. BKV's doing refracts. But recompletions now, when you mechanically isolate, you get virgin pressures and original flow rates out of these wells. I mean, it's like a brand new well.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And right
So
now,
I guess that's your differentiating factor then between what was and what you're doing.
Right. Because refracts, in fact, I had a client in Midland, actually with Endeavor, when I was trying to get them to do some refracts. And my client, Yvonne Church, says, Yvonne, what am I going to have to do to get your management to do refracts? Says, Bob, first thing you got to do is stop calling them refracts.
Fair enough.
And then
is it because it feels dirty? Is it because it's like bad? I mean, it sounds bad, but I'm not really in like the refracking space, so I don't really like. I'm trying to understand the concept and hand up right there. So
it'd be kind of hard to get a job.
Yeah.
It'd be hard for you to get a job if you call it a refrac because, oh, hey, great, appreciate the idea. I'll just go back and refrac it myself, right?
Well, or they tried it
But
before.
there's a lot more to it, and
So
that's
what
what you're
So
trying to sell.
So you call it a recompletion?
It's more of a recompletion now, yeah, because
Okay.
you're looking at brand new. It's the same thing. It's like if you got, and for booking reserves, it's the same thing. If you got a vertical well with 3 zones, the bottom one's producing, top ones are not, you can book those reserves. Those are P1, PV20 reserves. Well, what happens if you do this way? They're no longer bookable. Well, wait a minute, it's the same deal, right? You're mechanically isolating the original one and go in there. But what happens is that the refracts per se, that which you're going back into old perfs, they work. They're economic. They're only about $500,000. BKV's maybe spending $500,000-$600,000 on those Barnett refracts. They're getting 30, 40, 50% rate of return. But if you put $10 into a project and get $20 out, that's 100% rate of return. But it takes a lot of those to make a company. Whereas the average PV10 on a refrac in the Eagle Ford is about $5 million just from the production. And if you factor in the what you save on the child well, because the child wells, if you don't have a parent well refracting the same zipper pattern, the child well will migrate almost entirely to the parent well, and you'll leave the whole distal side of that child well undrained. You lose about 60% of your reserves of one well. It's 40 and 20 in the first and second well. But the third thing that's coming up is a lot of times when there's a parent well nearby, operators will, if they can't refrac it, like an operator I saw last week at the Saga conference in Charleston, they basically had an offset operator that had a relatively new well that was a parent well, and they had to put their pattern next to it. So they knew they were going to have a problem with that. So what they did was they moved the well, they took an entire drainage slot and left it vacant. So in the Eagle Ford, if you do that, you're not only losing the $5 million from the refrac, you're losing the $7 million from the parent protection, because you still don't get the protection, and you're losing the 700,000 barrels that you would have got out of that 10,000 foot lateral with 70 barrels a foot.
Yeah.
So it's a huge, probably $20-25 million cost of not doing a refrac. So it's starting to be real money.
Yeah.
So is the Eagle Ford better to do refracts or recompletions? What do we call them?
Recompletions.
Recompletions.
Sorry. Is that the best place to do it?
Well, it's very forgiving, Jay. The Eagle Ford and the Haynesville both have a very low contrast between what they call maximum horizontal stress and minimum horizontal stress, vertical and lateral. You have about a 3% difference in maximum minimum horizontal stress in the Eagle Ford, and I think Haynesville is pretty similar. And what happens in a new well, you basically frac perpendicular or at an angle to your well, and you drain that little narrow lane. Well, when you reorient your stresses, they go out and they go this way. They create a lot of complexity. So you can have a very poorly designed completion and still have good results. Now, I think what's happening in the Permian is when people have tried using Eagle Ford techniques, they haven't had the same results, because there, no matter how depleted you get it, you're going to get the little lanes all the time. You don't get reorientation there. But in the Eagle Ford and Haynesville, the highest recovery factor well, if you count cum production plus your refrac EUR, in every case, 10 times out of 10, is the refrac well. You recover more from a refrac total than you do from a new well, if you count the production that was produced before the refrac happened, because of this reorientation phenomenon.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Top orientation is like, I know we drilled a lot of wells 20 years ago, and we were drilling them along with the fracture system, which is not the best way to go.
perpendicular,
You're probably perpendicular to the fracture system underneath the ground. So if the oil and gas is laid this way, you want to drill a well this way instead of, if it's this way, you're just kind of going along with it and you're not producing as much.
Exactly,
so
right.
That's kind of what you're talking about.
Right, same thing, yeah.
So that's good. So is there a lot of Austin Chalk wells that you could do refracts in? Or so there's a lot of wells that were drilled back. I mean, we drilled wells in the 90s in the Austin Chalk.
Yeah.
And we didn't know where that drill bit was going. It was like you just drill it and you hope that the drill bit didn't come out of the ground somewhere out there, because you had no idea where the well was going. But it would seem to me like it'd be a great advantage to you and to other people to have your technology and say, hey, this is what we need to do, is to go in and do the refracts.
Sure, the chalk's a good
on the
place
chalk.
to go. The only problem with the chalk, Jay, is that you've got the Eagle Ford shale. Basically, I can tell within about 10% what that well is going to produce, because I know the volumetrics, I know the oil in place, I know what it's recovered, I know what I'm going to get with a refract. I can quantify that with a fairly good degree of precision. And we've in our ERTech paper coming up next month.
Because the drill bit stayed in the zone, or it didn't stay in the zone.
You know exactly where it is.
You know exactly,
Yeah, the well's already there.
And they put pipe in the ground, which we didn't put pipe in the ground.
No.
Back in the 1990s and 2000. Then all of a sudden they started putting pipe. So it's a big difference in drilling a well and shooting out a horizontal and not putting pipe. And we had flowing while drilling. I mean, it was just incredible. Paid out a well before they even completed it, pretty much. It was great, but then the well would be at 3 barrels a day, in 3 months.
Exactly.
Not good. So what they started doing was doing the traditional, where they would drill a well, go out horizontally, run pipe, frack, and the whole 9 yards.
Right, exactly.
That's why the Eagle Ford is, I'm assuming.
It's a little more predictable. The chalk is a great mark. In fact, SM's doing a lot of work with that down that. There's like a DOE pilot down there. I think it's in Webb County where they're doing a lot of work on that with the chalk. Chalk's got a lot of potential. It's hard to predict. Your volumetrics are very tricky. The petrophysics are very tricky. Eagle Ford, I can predict it fairly closely. In fact, in our ERTech paper we're presenting next month, we'll show a comparison of our predictions on a 5-well refrac project where we're pretty much spot on with the predictions from the logs. The new wells only produce 7.5% recovery factor. The refracts are around 13, and we ran our numbers at 14.
Yeah.
So we were assuming they get 14. They got a little less than what we predicted. But whereas if it was a chalk well, and there's a lot of chalk wells in this area, where it's awful hard to predict what your uplift's going to be.
Yeah.
When you're collecting all this data and you're putting it, outlining it, what does that data aggregation look like? And the reason I'm asking that is because at SuperDoug, there's been a lot of talks about automation, AI, data silos, and connecting the dots and those things. Do you see that coming into the work that you're doing, or what does that look like? Give me a little bit of visibility.
Yeah, good question, Jordan. But basically, what it all boils down to subsurface characterization. That's my background. I started with Schlumberger. I did 10 years as a wireline engineer. I did a lot of international reservoir characterization projects, and I kind of came into refraction from the back door. A lot of people come into refraction coming from the pumping side. We call them sack rippers today. that they had mostly pumping service experience, and they would set up refracts based on, pounds of sand per foot and, this and that and age.
Right.
But really what the key to refracts is what are the stranded reserves in the ground, which only comes from a reservoir characterization. So you have to have an integration within the operating companies. In fact, the one I just did a big project in South Texas where I did the calculations on the logs, and then I got with the operating company to use their geology staff to overlay the faults and overlay their geological biases on there to go ahead and let them estimate the oil in place from my data. So we had an integrated team to do that.
Got it.
So and that worked really well. So
cool.
So that part we're integrating.
Yeah.
So who's your biggest customer, or who's the customer that you like to have the most, I guess? Or what?
We've got two different ends. We do consulting projects for any operator. Basically, we do an evaluation of 1 to 200. And I'm not gonna lie, I just did one for a big company that has both Eagle Ford and Marcellus. I think I did about 500 wells for them.
Oh, wow.
Where we evaluated what the refract potential was of every single well. We ran economics on every single well.
How much time does that take?
Less and less as we do more and more.
That's how it goes.
But they are.
A few days.
A
few days.
You go through all these boxes. We had a guy, well drive, a minute ago.
Well drive?
Yeah, well drive.
Well drive. Derek Garland.
Derek,
And we talked about all the boxes, and so I guess you don't have to go through all those boxes, all the information anymore, because it's all on computer.
Which is nice, because then you can just type and search.
Well, I'm doing
or AI.
I've done about 80 wells on a project in New Mexico I'm working on right now. Not a shale project, but I've had to have one log scanned. Everything was in TIFF images. I only had to have one. We had one paper copy we had to scan out of the entire package.
So
it's all available electronically now.
Just imagine you go, hey, I need to see that Putnam number 34 log, and just say that, and all of a sudden,
boom, there it is.
Yep.
Wow, I can't imagine
it's
that.
magic.
The data vendors are very good at providing the tips and all that.
Yeah. What do you see for the oil and gas industry in this next year, like trending wise?
Well, in the refrac world, Jordan, the big thing I'm seeing, this is also in my JPT article. It was a guest editorial they have every month, and basically what I pointed out in there is that right now, almost virtually probably 90% of the refrac activity in the Eagle Ford, for instance, is all protection refracs, which are great. That's the $12 million, or you can skip a location, $20 million benefit. So it's really good. Like Devon, Conoco, Murphy, Marathon, Gradon, all the companies that are doing a lot of refracs there. Their number one priority is to protect that shale from an asymmetric frac, and they're doing that. But what they're not doing is they have a lot of pads that have 4 and 5 wells on them that are all old wells. They're not even looking at those. Number one, they're not going to, with a protection refrac, you've already got a crew out there to do the child well. So your crew is already there. Yeah. So adding another well to the zipper pattern is not a big deal. But what you would have to have operators do is take their crews off the new wells, which they're pretty much fully loaded right now,
right,
and put them dedicated onto an old pad. And we've got a partnership with Brewington Engineering now where they can come in and contract operate the wells if the operator wants to maintain an interest in the well. And basically we can come in and do the operations, and we can also provide half of the capital for the AFE from our capital sources.
So, interesting. So what do you think is a good recovery? So let's just say, for an example, you spend $10 million initially. Now, you're not involved in the initial because you're in the next stage, but let's say you spend $10 million drilling a well 5,000 feet, 10,000 feet, you get 500,000 barrels. So that 10,000, so 500,000 barrels times $80 is $40 million. And you spend 10, so you're getting 3-4 times your money on that, which is awesome. And then all of a sudden they come back to you and they go, "Hey Bob, so tell me, I want to refract some of these wells that I've already drilled." So you don't need to go get permits. You don't need to. I mean, you have to get a permit to refract or something, but it's not to build location. You don't have to do a lot of things initially up front to drill the well from the very beginning. So I may spend how much money do I spend, and how much oil am I going to get back?
Sure.
You think?
Well, the P50J in the Eagle Ford is right about 330,000 barrels recoverable. And
is that high or low? Is that good or bad? 330,000 barrels.
5,200-foot lateral, which is the P50 lateral length, your EFE cost is just right around $4 million. And with those type of metrics, you're looking at about a 3.5-4 to 1 return on your cash.
So I spend $4 million. I spend $4 million, and I get back 330,000 barrels, which is times 80, 24,
3 to 4 times that. 3 to 4 times that.
So 3 to 4 times the initial investment.
Okay. Our criteria for our investing backer is basically a 3 to 1 or more.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the upper half of P50 and above in the Eagle Ford right now. So it's pretty stout.
That's good. That's good.
And these pads too are, I talked to the senior scientist at one of the biggest operator there, and says, "Do you have any plans to go out and do these old pads?" And he said, "No, as soon as we get done with that parent well, we're off on a new well pad. We don't have time for that. We don't have the people. We don't have the time." But these pads, Jay, this P50 is a real number. Say you've got 5 wells on a pad. What's 5 times 330?
Oh, yeah.
That's in the ground right now.
Absolutely.
Right next to wells that they're drilling new wells, and also in an area where people are saying, "We don't have any inventory." Well,
why do you need it?
You're not looking very far. It's right there under your ground.
Yeah.
You're sitting on a gold mine.
Well, you're only producing 10%. Maybe, I don't know. I mean,
5 usually.
What do you think?
5 is a typical recovery factor for a refract candidate. 4, 5, maybe.
What's
6%.
the initial?
That's what I'm saying. 5 or 6% initial.
No, the initial recovery.
Right, 5 or 6%, and you're going to get 14 when you get done. You're going to get 14 maximum. So your delta depends on the original. It's really what that 14% of your oil in place is, which we're measuring from our subsurface measurements.
So what are we going to have to do to get freaking 100% of it out? I mean, how do we get it all out?
You're going to have to go to
ours.
It's EOR. You can mine it out, and like we did in Colorado. You can take the carriage out of the ground.
Start digging 12,000 feet underneath the ground.
That's what Exxon did with the Tosco project, and Shell had the Shell. I worked the Shell project there, where it's all.
That's how you get it all.
It's all. You get 100%.
Yeah, it may cost you several hundred million.
I mean, you got to tear the whole mountain down, but you can just throw it in the cooker.
Hey, if you have the means, I guess you can do it.
The Shell project I was working on. And it was technologically sound, but it was environmentally not really safe because you had to go through the White River Aquifer.
Right.
We estimated our reserves there, and this is measured reserves because you can actually measure the amount of oil coming out of Carrigan. You take it out and put it in the oven. 1.4 million barrels per acre recoverable in the Carrigan, in the oil shale. They call it oil shale.
Oil shale.
It's actually just pure Carrigan.
Wow.
Yeah.
You go along the side of the road there by Rifle with a blowtorch, you can light the rock on fire.
What?
Wow.
That's wild.
Well, the first guy, one of the initial settlers in Rifle, built his house out of Carrigan because it was so easy to cut and everything. It was nice solid rock. Everything was fine until he lit the first fire.
Yeah, exactly.
First and last fire.
Oops.
But you can get 100% from those rocks. But you got to cook it. You get 850 degrees Fahrenheit.
So, do you see demand for what you're offering growing as people are like, I don't want to drill more, or if they're not wanting to take that route?
What's the biggest fallback?
Yeah.
Is that a better question?
Maybe. Yeah.
Why isn't everybody doing it? That's why I'm like.
It's a good
yeah,
question.
that's what I'm trying to get to. Is like, is the demand growing? Are people realizing? Are they afraid to be canceled because of the term refrac?
I don't think that's too much of a concern, Jordan. But I think the big problem is the reason people aren't doing more is because people aren't doing more. I mean, it's inertia. It's the groupthink. I mean,
well, you're not holding acreage by drilling wells. I mean, it's like some companies may have 300,000 barrels or 300,000 acres, but they got to drill 400 wells to keep that.
Yeah.
So you're that's not anything with what you're doing. You're saying, hey, we got to go back and you're not drilling wells to keep acreage. So you're not. That's probably one big fallback, I would guess.
Yeah.
What would be a second one?
It's a huge volume. I mean, the volume, if you start doing the math of, say, that just a P50, 330,000 barrels for an Eagle Ford refract. Now, that assumes your spacing's got to be an issue. So not all your old wells are, if they're too close together, sometimes they're not a good.
Yeah.
Because you don't drill your wells typically to maximize production from that well. You have to be 660 feet away to be able to do that.
Yeah.
You got wells on closer spacing. Like at 500-foot spacing, you have about a 10.5% maximum recovery. With 660, you have a 14% maximum recovery.
Yeah.
So you're not all wells are refracts, but you can go on these pads that have these multiple wells, and these are pads that are going to be plugged. I mean, there's only one thing that's going to happen to those wells, unless somebody comes up with some magic EOR technique, which EOG has tried and
enhanced oil recovery,
yeah.
EOR.
Enhanced oil recovery. Right, exactly.
Well, the first time I heard about it, I was like several years ago. I can't remember where I first met you, but at one of those dinners or something. But you said, we refract wells in places that have already produced. And I'm like, don't they only produce 5, 10, 15% of the oil initially? And there's still around 90% of the oil in the ground. And you have an advantage because you know how to. I'm like, why wouldn't everybody be doing this? It's such a great.
It's nice. It's
such a great thought.
It's awareness, and it's also the bandwidth too. I mean, I think companies, the way this is going to really take off is when you would go out and develop these old pads that are all old wells, and there's literally thousands of them in the Eagle Ford and Permian and all over. And those are not being even talked about right now. I mean, like, we're talking about it. We're trying to get people to
See, I'd love to think about some deals that you have that we could get with my business development guys over here and say, hey, these kind of deals we're looking at, and these are the best candidates.
Yeah.
And man, we could buy those for nothing almost, and then come in back here and use the technology to refract them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the average.
You do the analysis first, and then you do it.
Right. We look at the oil in place. We get the oil in place because what's in the ground is first. And you get an oil place per acre, and then you assume that you're getting a 330-foot wing on either side times your lateral length.
Yeah.
And that gives you the acres. So you divide your EUR by that acreage. So you divide your EUR per acre into the oil in place per acre to give you your recovery factor.
Got
and
it.
typically on a well, say in the Permian, that's typically 3 to 4%. On pre-2016 wells, Eagle Ford's 4 or 5% maybe of that.
So how many decimals do you bring that out to? 8, 10, or 12 decimals out on the other side of that. I'm just kidding. These guys are really smart. They go through all that stuff and they figure all that stuff out.
It feels like a lot of math, and I'm like, I am marketing all the way, branding, you name it. But when it comes to math, it's tough.
It's how much is in the ground and how fast you're going to get it out. That's all math you got to know.
How much does it cost? How much does it cost and how much will I make? Right?
Yeah.
So, and that's a great way to put it, because I thought initially it was like, wow, what a great idea. That you're probably getting a lot of companies to do it themselves, or you're helping them. But I'm like, why wouldn't you? It's such a great thought. If we had wells that we could do that on right now, I'd say all day long.
Yeah. What does it take to work at your company? Like if somebody wanted to work for you with you.
I played rugby for 8 years, so I'm brain damaged. So.
I don't know. It doesn't sound like it to me. But if you're looking at somebody like Jay and I talk a lot about this, right? Whenever you're looking at that 18-year-old that's looking to get into their career or look at different career opportunities, like what would it take to then take your path? Because you've taken a different path than most to get to where you're at now, right? Yeah. But what would you say to the 18-year-old, right? That's looking to figuring that out and trying to know where to go or think about what to do next. What would you say to them?
Well, it's a lot of fun. When I was a kid, I used to like to play detective, and I was big on James Bond and all this stuff, on discovering things. And petrophysics and the subsurface characterization and refract is a lot like finding buried treasure. It's exciting. I mean, you're adding value. There's stuff there that won't come out unless you do your stuff. It's going to stay there forever. So to me, that's tremendously rewarding just to be part of that process. Like I've got accepted to law school, and I'd rather be in a business where you're creating wealth and not redistributing wealth. So I mean, it's a lot more meaningful if you can be creating wealth or finding wealth than it is to be redistributing wealth. A lot of businesses are just moving stuff from one place to the other. Well, let's actually go find some treasure down there that people are not touching. And this is in fact, my license plate on my convertible, I just got it in. It's got the letter P and then NA, PNA. And then the number 2, and then P1. So PNA, plug and abandon, to P1, producing reserve.
Oh my God! I love that. Yes.
That'd be great if it's not on a Tesla. Is it on your Tesla? No, you don't.
Well, I do have a CNG powered Ford F-150, so I have half the carbon footprint of the Ford Lightning, and it costs 1/3 of the cost of the Ford Lightning, and I got a 1,000-mile range.
There you go.
There you go.
So
do you find it like annoying is not the word, but like, oh my gosh, I forgot to charge or anything like that? Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah, I get a 1,000-mile range. I get 300 miles out of my CNG and 700 out of my gasoline.
Wow.
And asking a guy that can barely afford gas for his car, to go electric, it's like asking a homeless person to go buy a mansion. It's a solution.
Yeah.
It'll work.
There you go.
Fair enough.
Hey, so how do people find you, and where's your office?
We're office in the Heights in Houston, and
cool.
basically just integratedergyservices.com with hyphens in between. And,
all right.
Very cool.
We're good.
Well, it was a pleasure having you on,
Thank you.
Bob.
Appreciate it.
It's always nice to see you and talk to you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
You bet.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Bob.
All right, Jay.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody, there's another part right there of the oil and gas business and how this business is so fast, and there's so many different things that people can learn about this. And I mean, it's Jordan and I talk about this, and hey, we want people 16 to 22-year-olds or dads to let this in on your kids, just to learn, hey, there's so many different things about the oil business. Find what you really do want and go for it. That's our major focus, helping, giving back. So thank you for listening to the Jay Young Show, and until next time, thank you very much.